I'm Marin, and this is Post-its and Pens. Hello and welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Marin, and here you will find a little beauty, a little books, and a little teaching content. So if that sounds like something you might enjoy, I would love for you to subscribe and stick around and join me in my little corner of YouTube. In today's video, I am going to take you through my October reading recap to let you know all of my thoughts on the books that I read in the month of October. So let's go ahead and get into the video. So, full disclosure, October was not a great reading month for me. I had set myself a TBR of 7 books, and I only read 2 of those. So, I will do a quick recap of what I was supposed to read, and then we'll get into what I actually read, and I'll share my thoughts. Okay, so I did play my usual Wheel of TBR game to figure out my October TBR. However, as I mentioned, I didn't do a very good job of reading those books. But in October, I was supposed to read 7 books. The first one was for the prompt of retelling, and I was supposed to read Her Dark Curiosity by Megan Shepherd. I didn't read it. The second book that I spun was a color prompt. It was like a brownish shade. I chose Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. I did read that one. The third book was new release. I chose My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. I did not read that one. The fourth prompt was for a short book, and I chose Fangs by Sarah Andersen. Did not read that one. And the fifth one was a Goodreads Choice nominee / winner, and for that I chose Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and I did not read that one. Then I chose 2 books for my TBR jar. I chose Storybound by Marissa Burt, which I did not read, and I chose Once We Were by Zhang, which I did not read. I also had 3 books from my 21 books to read in 2021 list on that TBR. I did read 2 of those, although one of them I did not finish in October. As I mentioned, it was a rough reading month, y'all. So the one that I did finish was I Hunt Killers by Barry Lyga. And then the other 2 that I was supposed to read in October was One Last Strike by Tony LaRussa. I have since finished that one, but it wasn't in October. And the other one was Columbine by Dave Cullen, and I did not read that one. So that means I have a lot of books that have been rolled over. Now, 2 of the books from my Wheel of TBR in October I have since finished, but it doesn't count for October. So I won't be talking about that here. I will talk about that in November. I also am just going to roll all of the others over onto my books to finish before the end of 2021 list. So I am doing a little mini project, if you will, which I am titling Start 2022 on a Clean Slate. And in this project, I am taking any books from previous TBRs that I did not finish or that I didn't officially DNF. I'm not going to read ones that I DNF'd, but books that I was supposed to read that I did not read and or did not finish. In the case of one book, I will be rolling them over, and I am going to finish them before the end of 2021. This is in an attempt to start 2022 with a fresh slate of books to read. So that's what I'm working towards. So the books that I did not read in October are on that list. I'm up to quite a few of them, y'all, so we're going to have to see how it goes. But anyway, enough of that, enough backstory. Let's go ahead and talk about the books that I did read in the month of October. So part of my issue with not being able to complete my October TBR is that I had rolled 3 books from September over. And I did manage to read all 3 of those. So the first one that I read in the month of October was The Midnight Lie by Marie Rutkowski. Now, this is set in the same universe as her Winners trilogy, but it's set in a different, like, country. The country that it's set in is like an island in the sea, although there are mentions of the other world that you became familiar with in the Winners trilogy. So The Midnight Lie is a sapphic, slow burn romance. The main character is basically of the lowest caste. She lives in a walled-in city. Her life is kind of predetermined, and she meets a character from the country that we were introduced to in the Winners trilogy. And they kind of have a slow burn romance going on. Now, there is a lot of things about this island nation that are shrouded in mystery. You hear the term, "that's how it's always been," a lot, and nobody really thinks to question it until the main character meets this person. And then she starts wondering what is really going on. And so basically it's like a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of a slow burn romance. There's some adventure. I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and I will be reading the second book. It is a duology, so the second book will sum everything up, and I'm curious to see how it's all going to end. Okay, the second book that I read in October was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I loved this book. I found it very engaging. I was constantly wondering what was going on. Addie is cursed, if you will. She makes a deal with a god who gives her eternal life, but nobody remembers who she is. So as soon as she leaves that person's sight, say a door closes or she leaves the room or they leave the room, they forget about her. So basically she goes through this never-ending life of people who don't remember who she is, who forget her. And all of a sudden she meets a boy. She's in New York City at this point. It is like 2014. And let me get his name because I don't remember what it was. Let's see. Henry. His name is Henry. So suddenly Henry remembers her. So it kind of turns into, why does he remember her? What's going on? There are some flashbacks to her past because she's basically telling her story. The god who cursed her, she named him Luke, as in Lucifer, and he makes appearances and has some things going on. And I just really loved this book. It had really great atmosphere. It kept me engaged, kept me wondering how things were going to work out. I do want to let you know it has a bit of a open/ambiguous ending. So if that's not your thing, be forewarned. But I loved this one. Definitely my favorite book of the month of October. It was wonderful. Okay, and the third book that I read in October, which was the last rollover from September, was Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. So this is the first book in her Wayward Children series. Basically, Eleanor West has set up a school for children who have found their way through doorways into other worlds, and her school is kind of a safe haven for them. So we are following the various children who have made her school their home. And going into this, I didn't really know what to expect. It was a bit darker, a bit more horror-like than I'd been anticipating. But that was not a bad thing because I was reading it in October, so, you know, spooky season. But definitely did not see some of that coming. So you are introduced to some characters from, like, classic nursery rhymes like Jack and Jill. And but there's some pretty like brutal things that happen in this book, so I was not expecting that. It was a very fast read. I wouldn't say that it was anything earth-shattering. I enjoyed it enough that I'm going to read the second book, but I only gave this one 3 stars. I felt like it was okay. It was fine. I liked it, but I didn't feel super in love with it, if that makes sense. So I will be reading the second book. I'm curious to see where the series is going to go. From what I can tell from the synopses, from the other installments, you're following like other kids that you met in the first book, I think. So yeah, curious to see where that series is going. I know there are a ton of them, and I think she's releasing like another one, at least one more. So yeah, we'll see what I think, but I do plan on reading the series all the way through. Okay, now let's talk about the 2 books that were on my October TBR that I actually read. So the first one was Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, as I mentioned. I really enjoyed this one as well. I did listen to it on audio, which I feel like really helped. I do not speak Spanish, so hearing the narrator say some of the terms and the names and things really helped, because I would have been pronouncing them incorrectly. So there's that. I loved the idea of the brew hex, which is what they call each other, with their abilities to basically send the dead to their final resting place. It was nice atmosphere, especially reading in October. So it's set during the lead up to Halloween and Day of the Dead. So that had a nice kind of spooky feel to it. And I loved the characters. So if you are unfamiliar, this book follows a transgender boy who is trying to find his place in this very traditional setting of the brew hex, okay? Because in this world, men have one type of gift and women have another type of gift. So they don't feel like Yadriel can be a true brujo because he's transgender, and they are just not willing to kind of cross over these traditional like gender roles, if you will. Yadriel has a cousin named Marissa who is quite the spitfire. I really enjoyed her. But basically, Yadriel stumbles upon a ghost. The ghost is Julian. He is a student who attends Yadriel's school, and Yadriel sets out to try to help Julian figure out what happened to him, because Julian can't remember how he died or what's going on. There are some mysteries, there's some thriller aspects, there is a lot of Mexican history interspersed, which I found really interesting, and it really takes a deep dive into Day of the Dead and what that means and how they celebrate that. So I really, really loved this one. Also, there's like a romance between Yadriel and Julian, and y'all, it made my heart really happy. But I loved this one, and I would highly recommend it. I am looking forward to reading other things by Aiden Thomas. And yeah, that's really all I have to say. I gave this one 4 stars. It was quite delightful. And the last book that I read from my actual October TBR was I Hunt Killers by Barry Lyga. Now, this one was on my 21 books to read in 2021 list. I had an ebook of this book since it was released in, 2012. And when it first came out, people were raving about it. They loved it. And so I put it on my TBR at that point, and then I just never read it. So this book follows a boy named Jasper. He goes by Jazz. Jazz is the son of a very notorious serial killer. And the book is kind of, I guess, like an introspection, if you will. Jazz is convinced that there's something wrong with him, that he thinks about things that he shouldn't think about, that he doesn't feel emotions the way he's supposed to, because Jasper's father was basically grooming him to also become a serial killer. So Jazz was a witness to a lot of his father's crimes, and it did a number on him. So this is kind of like nature versus nurture, if you will. And in this book, another serial killer starts killing people in Jazz's very small town. So Jazz is trying to figure out what's going on. At first, the police don't want to admit that it might be a serial killer. They think that that's ridiculous. They're a very small town. What is the likelihood that there would be 2 serial killers to make their home in this town, etc.? But Jazz is convinced that it's a serial killer. And so he's basically working to try to figure out what's going on. Jazz has 2 friends. He has his girlfriend, and then he has his best friend. And they're kind of like a little trio of detectives, if you will. So this book was quite dark. I knew that it would be going in. But to be honest, there was just something about it that I didn't love. So Jazz is very wishy-washy through a lot of it. He's difficult to understand, I guess. He's difficult to feel for. So I kind of just went through the whole book not really caring what was going on, which I don't think was the author's goal. So in the end, I gave this one 3 stars. It was fine. What I liked about it was kind of like the mystery thriller aspect, but I didn't love Jazz. And it's a trilogy, and I will not be reading the other 2 books, even though the first one kind of ends on a cliffhanger. Just didn't really work for me. I'm glad that I went ahead and finally read it, but I was really hoping for more, if that makes sense. Hey, and those are the 5 books that I read in October. And here's the thing. 5 books is not bad. It's not bad. 5 books would be great if 3 of the 5 had actually been on my TBR. So that's where I'm at with that. I am currently working on Mexican Gothic. I am planning on reading Fangs this weekend. Those will be the final 2 books from my wheel of TBR for me to finish, and then I'm going to roll into my November TBR. The thing is, when I keep having these carryovers, it puts me behind. So, yeah, I just need to be better. And the other thing was that in October, I really didn't feel like reading a vast majority of the time. Those 3 books that I read from September, I kind of read all in 1 week. And then I only read 2 others the remainder of the month. So I would say maybe it was kind of like a reading slump, but not really, because it was more that I just didn't feel like reading. I was tired. I was a little stressed out. We had parent-teacher conferences, which require a lot of prep work. Things at school have been a little bit difficult, and when I've come home, I just haven't wanted to read. So I need to try to find a balance and work through that. And hopefully I can do that in November. So I do have an entire week off for Thanksgiving. Hopefully I can do some serious reading during that week and not fall behind. That's the goal. Anyway, this was kind of a long, rambly video. Sorry about that. But if you did enjoy my October reading recap, please leave me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more from me. And I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.